بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يا رب العالمين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. باب الشح. This chapter is regarding miserliness, being stingy. Both Asma radiallahu anha and Lady Aisha radiallahu anha were very kind and generous women. And this tells us that both were very firm believers. To be able to part with one's possessions for charity, motivated only by a desire to earn reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is indicative of faith having established itself firmly in a person's heart. Why? Because generally speaking, wealth is the most beloved thing to a person, especially a person who is greedy for wealth, who is a miser. So to let go of that wealth and apparently not get anything in return, to not receive anything in return. When you're giving in charity, apparently you don't receive anything of worldly benefit. So it's very, very difficult. When a person does give charity, then it's an indication that they are firmly rooted in their faith, deeply rooted in their faith. And maybe ask that why we make generosity so strongly associated with faith. It's not true that a person may be a good believer in Allah and yet he loves his wealth and his property so much that he does not wish to part with it, preferring to use it only for that which he and his family may need. This is something which cannot be subject to personal opinion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has coupled the two together. He says in the Quran, believe in God and in his messenger and give in charity of that of which he has made you trustees. Those of you who believe and give in charity will have a great reward. In chapter 57, verse 7. As we see, generosity and spending and charity are mentioned together with faith. Muslim scholars consider this to be highly significant, both from the point of view of the reward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows for generosity and the fact that one quality is an expression of the other. One quality, meaning the quality of being generous and charitable, is an expression of one's faith. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says in a hadith, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين. Or كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, that none of you is a true believer. None of you is a true believer until he loves me more than his parents, more than his children, and more than anyone in mankind. A person, of course, will claim to love their parents more than their wealth. If you have your wealth on one side and your parents on the other, or your children on the other side, and you had to sacrifice one for the other, a sane, just person would sacrifice wealth and keep their children or parents. And if someone does the other, then that's not a normal person. That is a person who is rotten on the inside. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that if we are supposed to love him more than our parents, more than our children, even more than ourselves. And some people really love themselves. This is a huge phenomenon. This is a big problem. Where people, they become obsessed with themselves. And what does this lead to? It leads to excessive selfishness. And excessive selfishness, it goes against the teachings of Islam, directly against the teachings of Islam. So generosity is a practical quality, meaning it involves action. One cannot be generous by making emphatic claims to be so. One practical gesture may be a far more powerful expression of this trait than the strongest of verbal claims. And we know the saying, actions speak louder than words. Faith, on the other hand, is something which establishes its roots in the heart. It manifests itself through action. There is, however, a well-defined set of requirements the fulfillment of which earns a person the title of believer. There are certain qualities which may take various manifestations, and the aggregation of which proves that the person concerned is a firm believer. In the Quranic verse that I mentioned above, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes clear that readiness to part with one's money and property for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's cause is one of the most important manifestations of our faith. Perhaps we shouldn't point out that when we speak about, it should be mentioned that when we speak about generosity and spending within an Islamic context, we are only referring to something being spent for no motive other than earning the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, earning the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and reward from Him. It's something given for Allah's sake and with no expectation of immediate financial return. You may give away your money or your property recognizing that you will get nothing in return, either financially or morally, except what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to give you. In other words, you give it away hoping for Allah's reward and nothing else. In human life, money is so important that in all societies which do not conduct their affairs on the basis of a divine religion, people enjoy high esteem if they are wealthy. Wealth is equated with success and good character. To be wealthy is to have the one virtue which covers up most of a person's faults. This love of money is a universal human trait. It is, however, moderated by faith, which imparts to a believer certain motives which can overcome personal feelings and desires. To be generous is to demonstrate one's trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As believers, as Muslims, we know that we gain only what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides all of His creation with their sustenance. He has placed in our planet enough resources and potential to ensure that every human being and every creature will have what they need to survive and live a comfortable life. He has apportioned for us our provisions. We believe in taqdeer. Nevertheless, people always tend to forget this, and they are keen to preserve what they have. They tend to think that if they keep what they have in hand and work to get more, then that is good, that is proper. But the only way, and they believe that the only way to climb the social ladder, that is the only way to climb the social ladder and be amongst the rich. That's what people believe, holding on to your money and increasing it. A believer has different ideas. He knows that he can only get what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him. When he parts with his money for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sure to reward him. He also knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reward is far better for him than anything he owns. It is for this reason that the Prophet ﷺ says, وَبِي قَالَ حَدَّثْنَا مُسَدَّدٌ قَالَ حَدَّثْنَا أبو عوانة عن سهيل بن أبي صالح عن صفوان بن أبي يزيد عن القعقاع بن اللجلاج عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يجتمع غبار في سبيل الله ودخان جهنم في جوف عبد أبدا ولا يجتمع الشح والإيمان في قلب عبد أبدا. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reports, whose name was Abdul Rahman ibn Sakhr. He reports that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, dust raised in a campaign of being in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Allah's cause and the smoke of the fire of Jahannam can never be together. Can never be together in the body of a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does this mean? That the dust that is raised in when a person goes out to answer the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a campaign, that and the smoke of the fire of Jahannam can never meet. They can never be together. This is indicative that a person who goes out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with his life, putting his life on the line, then this is a true believer. And a true believer of this level, of this magnitude, if he goes out with sincerity, then that dust that rises up when he is on the field, then that dust and the fire of Jahannam will not mix, meaning that person is saved from the fire of Jahannam. And avarice and miserliness and stinginess, and on the other hand, faith, these two things cannot exist side by side in the heart of any person. وَلَا يَجْتَمِعُ الشُّحْ وَالْإِيمَانِ فِي قَلْبِ عَبْدٍ أَبَدًا. This is a very scary statement. Why? Because apparently, if you take this at face value, this narration, this states that if a person is stingy and miserly, then that person can't have iman, can't possess iman. However, the scholars explain, and I'll read the next narration as well as it's connected to this. وَبِقَالَ حَدَّثَنَا مُسْلِمٌ قَالَ حَدَّثَنَا صَدَقَةُ بْنُ مُوسَى هو أبو المغيرة السلمي قال حدث مالك بن دينار عن عبد الله بن غالب هو الحداني عن أبي سعيد الخدري, whose name was Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. His name was Sa'ad ibn Malik. Sa'ad ibn Malik ibn Sinan. عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال. These are names we have to learn, or we should learn their birth names, what their parents named them, because you're going to hear them time and time again, especially when we are hearing a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because they narrate so many narrations, so many reports from the Prophet ﷺ. So Abu Hurairah, Abdurrahman ibn Sakhr, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Sa'ad ibn Malik. We should learn them. They are our champions, our heroes. قال خصلتان لا يجتمعان في مؤمن البخل وسوء الخلق. Subhanallah. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, two traits cannot exist together in a believer's heart. These are miserliness and bad manners. Miserliness, being stingy, and bad conduct. They can't exist in the heart of a believer. Meaning, essentially, the heart of the believer is giving, is generous, is charitable, and has good conduct, has good manners, is a good person. This is how a believer is. In these two statements from the Prophet ﷺ, we are told of the qualities and traits which pull a man in opposite directions. Hence, they cannot exist side by side. They can't exist together. First, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that when a person inhales dust for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's cause, he will not inhale the smoke of the fire of Jahannam. When we read this, a picture of a battle in which believers engage in the defense of Islam is drawn in our minds with horses raising dust as they run. But we can understand it in today's time as well. And similarly, two mutually exclusive traits, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives the sins of those people who go out in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's cause, and they are not thrown into the fire of Jahannam as punishment for sins they may have done, since they have a firm belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the day of judgment. Their sins are overlooked. And this is the definition of Allahumma hasibna hisaba yasira. Oh Allah, grant me an easy accountability, meaning no accountability. And no accountability ensures direct entry into the gardens of Jannah. And this is what we want. We don't want to be taken to task. Why? Because our book of deeds, not looking good. And this is for everyone. This is for every human being. So the best case scenario, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turns a blind eye, and figuratively speaking, and he doesn't take us to task, no accountability, straight to the gardens of Jannah. Because what is hell for a believer? What is the fire of Jahannam for a Muslim, for a mu'min? If it's not a place to dwell in forever and ever. No, that's for the disbelievers. Hell for a believer is the cleansing process. Why? Jannah, the gardens of Jannah, heaven, paradise, is so pure that a person who has sins on them can't go inside. A person who has sins on them, and all of us have sins, they can't go inside. So, unfortunately, some believers, Usatul Mu'mineen, those that would commit sins, if they are taken to task and they have to go through that cleansing process, that cleansing process is the fire of Jahannam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. We don't want to go through that. Why? Because إن شاء غفر إن شاء غفر له إن شاء عذب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He wants, He can forgive us, and that way we don't have to go through the cleansing process. We are forgiven, we clean through the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the mercy of Allah, and direct entry Jannah. Or if He wants, He can punish us. But that's what hell is, that's what Jahannam is for a believer. Because fire is a cleansing element, right? Fire cleans, and it'll clean the sin off of the believer. Whereas the purpose of the fire of Jahannam for a disbeliever is different. That's his abode, his dwelling forever and ever. So now we understand that similarly, two mutually exclusive traits are miserliness and faith. Miserliness, which indicates greed and an eager desire to hold on to what one may have, suggests that one does not trust enough in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what it suggests. This is what it indicates to. This leads one to think that to hold on to one's belongings is the best insurance for his future. A believer, on the other hand, thinks that giving away one's property for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake is the surest way of getting something better in return. The Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith, مَا نَقَصَتْ مَالٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ. Never has it happened in the history that a person gave in charity and he lost his wealth. And he lost in wealth. But you'll tell me, what are you talking about? When you give in charity, you lose. It goes down. Bank balance drops because you just gave in charity. But in essence, in reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts so much barakah in your wealth that things will happen and you'll be like, where did this come from? Oh my God, why are things looking up in life? Why is it that it's because you're helping others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps the slave as long as the slave is helping others. مَا كَانَ الْعَبْدُ فِي عَوْنِ أَخِيهِ. As long as we're in service to others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in service to us. This is how it works. It's a cycle. It's a cycle. And apparently it goes against logic. It goes against logic. Because logically speaking, I should hold on to my wealth so it can increase. It can increase, and I'll have a good capital to purchase this or that. Whereas it doesn't work like that for a believer. It's difficult to grasp. Why? Because this goes against the teachings of what we've been taught in the West growing up, with all of these isms. What do they teach us, this and that? Whereas in Islam, مَا نَقَصَتْ مَالٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ. So it's this never happened. We have to get into the habit of giving. It's very difficult. It's very, very difficult. Especially when you work so hard to earn that wealth, you don't want to give it away. You don't want to give it away. It's easy for someone who got a fortune somehow to be generous and charitable. But if you work for that money, it's difficult to let go because your hands earn that wealth. But this will show how much we truly believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are not theoretical principles. Rather, they have great practical value. I say without hesitation that no one who wishes to take up the challenge, parting with one's money for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's cause, will ever be disappointed. What is more is that the reward is not only in the hereafter. Part of it is paid immediately in this life. When a human being demonstrates that he has total trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will certainly respond to him and show that his trust is well placed. People only have to try and they will never regret trying. وبه قال حدثنا أبو نعيم قال حدثنا الأعمش عن مالك بن الحارث عن عبد الله بن ربيعة قال كنا جلوسا عند عبد الله فذكروا رجلا فذكروا من خلقه فقال عبد الله رأيتم لو قطعتم رأسه أكنتم تستطيعون أن تعيدوه؟ قالوا لا. قال فيده؟ قالوا لا. قال فرجله؟ قالوا لا. قال فإنكم لا تستطيعون أن تغيروا خلقه حتى تغيروا خلقه. إن النطفة لتستقر في الرحم 40 ليلة ثم تنحدر دما ثم تكون علقة ثم تكون مضغة ثم يبعث الله ملكا فَيَكْتُبُ رِزْقَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ وَشَقِيًّا أَوْ سَعِيدًا. A lengthy narration. Abdullah ibn Rabi'a said, we were sitting with Abdullah radiallahu anhu. When Abdullah is used unrestrictedly or without the name of the father, Abdullah bin something, then generally speaking, this was referring to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, which most of the Hanafi madhab gets their teachings from. Who? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. And some people mentioned a person and his manners. So Abdullah radiallahu anhu said, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, suppose that you have his head cut off. Can you put it back? They said no. He said, what about his hand? Can you put it back? They said no. He said, in his leg? They said no. He said, learn then that you cannot change his character unless you can change his physical form. The drop of semen stays in the womb for 40 nights. Then it becomes like a clot of blood, and then it becomes a clinging mass, and then a lump of flesh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then sends an angel who writes down its means of livelihood and character, and whether happy or unhappy, but more specifically, whether fortunate or unfortunate. In this hadith, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, one of the best scholars amongst the Prophet ﷺ's companions. There were very few of the scholars of the Prophet ﷺ that were deemed scholars, official positions of scholarship. Whereas all of the Sahaba anhum were just and they were pious and they were righteous and they were knowledgeable, but some of them had a special position. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu was one of them. He makes it clear that it's not possible to change any person's character. However, it is possible to direct the different aspects of one's character so that they work for what is good and beneficial to the person himself and to his community. A person may get angry very easily. If he trains himself to direct his anger away from personal matters, then he is only angry when there is some violation of Islamic values or rules. And this is anger in its place. In this way, he may contribute to improving social values. As we have noted, the Prophet ﷺ often stressed the importance of good manners and moral values. This is what this book is mainly about, subhanAllah. Al-Adab Al-Mufrad. Adab. Adab is good character, good conduct. The character of the Prophet ﷺ, of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. In some communities, devotion is emphasized so strongly that worship seems to be an end in itself. In Islam, worship has a dual purpose: to maintain the faith purely and to improve the character of the worshipper. The Prophet ﷺ says in Hadith, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have only been sent to perfect good conduct. I have only been sent for this reason. Hence, Islam encourages voluntary worship, especially in the depth of the night when a person is alone, standing up to worship in a preference to sleep and rest. Such worship has a profound influence on the character of the worshipper. If we are able to do so, this will naturally improve our character, because a person will be more vigilant and aware of his actions. And what is this? In essence, it is taqwa, fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being able to refrain from that which is haram, impermissible. And this also includes manners and character. If a person has bad character, this is impermissible. This is impermissible. And harming other people, whether it's physical harm, verbal harm, emotional harm, abuse, all of these different forms of abuse, this goes against the character of the believer. This goes against the character of the believer. Because of this influence, the Prophet ﷺ and his companions were commanded in the early days of Islam to stand up in worship at night, to help them mold their new characters and to give them additional strength of faith. How did the Sahaba radiallahu anhu go from being the dogs of the Arabian Peninsula to being the best human beings to ever live? How did it happen? It didn't happen overnight. There was a serious training process. They were molded. They were molded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by his Habib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to become the best of the best. So they worked on themselves. They didn't get rid of those qualities that they had, that they were able to channel in the right direction. Umar radiallahu anhu was a staunch man. He was a severe, stern, strict man before Islam, but for the wrong reasons. After Islam, he was still strict and staunch and stern for the right reasons. And he channeled that in the right direction. خياركم في الجاهلية خياركم في الإسلام. The best of you before the advent of Islam were the best of you, or are the best of you after accepting Islam. And this also it applies to us today. For those people that were not righteous or not pious, or you would never consider yourself pious, but getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through that journey. Before that, if you had qualities, you're able to amend those qualities or change those qualities for the better. But not necessarily removing them or getting rid of them, but don't channel them in the right direction. And this is how they were able to develop develop their qualities, their character, and it gave them additional strength in their faith. And the Prophet ﷺ and his companions fulfilled this order of standing up in the night. This was a form of training yourself. Standing up in the night is not easy. Why? You're going against your desires. I want to sleep. I want to enjoy. Don't bother me. I'm sleeping. But to force yourself to get up, to make wudu, and that sink is running and it's cold water, and you have to, and then you make wudu, and then you come and then you pray salah. What is this This is a training process. If you're able to physically suppress your desires, then it won't be difficult for you to improve your character. These two things are tied hand in hand. They go hand in hand. So they would spend several hours during the night in prayer and worship. They did so for a whole year, devoting a portion of 1 or to 2/3 of each night to worship. This directive was later relaxed. It was made easy to make night worship voluntary, but strongly recommended once their iman was molded. Subhanallah. If you notice, in the time of Mecca, in the Meccan period, there weren't laws and injunctions. It was just working on their iman. قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, and so on and so forth. Whereas in Medina, we get laws and injunctions and rulings, prayer and fasting and going for pilgrim. All of these different things became incumbent. Although they might have been there, the concept was there previously for some of these things. A lot of these things, they had an idea, the concept was there, but they didn't become mandatory. The prohibition of alcohol or so other rulings like this, it would have been very difficult for them to adapt or to follow and obey those commandments if it was during the beginning period of Islam, because they weren't trained yet. The training process is very important, and a lot of believers, they want to skip that training process today. They want to jump right into all of the commandments, and they want to take things head on, and then they end up exhausted. And it's not for me, or I can't do it, and they just strike out. Why? Because you need to learn to take things slowly. Learn to adapt. Learn to adapt. If we have bad qualities, we need to work on them slowly and slowly. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us character like the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to go through that training process. Really, don't ever be content with how you are in any faction of, in any area of life. In any area of life, don't ever be content with where you are. Don't be complacent. No, always work to improve. Always work to improve and work to get better. If you get comfortable, then there's no room for improvement. SubhanAllah, this is what Islam teaches us, muhasabah, taking ourselves into account. Have I said something wrong today? Have I been mean to anyone? This is something I really need to work on myself. I need to take myself into account every day, every night if possible. And listen to people when people have to tell you things, especially it's from your family members. They want the best for you. And they might tell you in a harsh manner or reprimand you, but take that into consideration. Don't close it off. They want the best for you. They see that you're lacking in a certain department. To improve in that department, they reprimand you or they scold you, or sometimes they even tell you in a nice manner if you're lucky. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us susceptible to that, and to allow us to change and improve and become better humans every single day. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins and reunite us in Jannatul Firdaus. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhanallah.